Hey guys, Montel here, and welcome to Let's Be Blunt. Today, we're turning our spotlight on a pioneer in the luxurious cannabis lifestyle and a leading voice for social equity in the industry. Whether you're a cannabis connoisseur or you're just somebody who's weed curious, canna curious, you're going to want to make sure you lean into this podcast. Buckle up and let's get ready to get this great show underway. Join us today. We have the titan of cannabis culture, the CEO of Monko, the luxury cannabis experience, Mr. Terrence White. Thank you so much, Terrence, for being a part of the show today, sir.
Thank you, Montel. I appreciate the opportunity to converse with you. How are you?
I'm doing great. So look, you've got a really incredible story from your extensive background in real estate, navigating over $400 million in transactions, to founding one of the most three successful companies, and now revolutionizing the cannabis industry with Monko and Pleasant Hill Wellness. Let's start from the beginning. Tell me a little bit about where you're from. Give me a little bit about your background. What got you into cannabis?
Well, I'm from a small place called New Bern, North Carolina. So if you're a former military guy, thanks for serving.
Yes,
it sits between Camp Lejeune and Cherry Point.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I went to North Carolina Central, came to DC area in 2015. I'm sorry, I'm getting old. 1995.
Got it.
And I returned back in 2015. I did a short stint in FCI Morgantown, which gave me the thought of getting into cannabis, because while I was incarcerated for 18 and a half months, I was with friends that I'd known before I went to prison, and some I met in prison that were doing 8 and 10-year sentences for cannabis.
Wow.
And as someone who has been around the war on drugs, affected me just like most Black families in America. I was saddened to see that I was doing a white collar crime, that the same friends were doing double the time I was for something that I knew was a plant that had been around thousands of years. Something that the government in 1968, after the riots in 70, in the Drug Act of 1970, made a substance, one controlled substance, so that they can incarcerate people of color because of the riots. That was a kind of a payback.
Let me tell you, I think from your ears to God's ears and mine and my mouth and God's ears also, it's really kind of funny, man, because, not too many people really recognize the fact I have called cannabis the re-enslavement tool. When they needed to have an opportunity to put us to figure out a way to continue slavery in the late 20s and early 30s, having lost the Civil War, they came up with this thing and vilified cannabis, when cannabis had been, and hemp had been something that this nation was built on. But they recognized very quickly that they could utilize it, against brown and Black people and put us back in jail indiscriminately. And that's the reason why we look back now, since 1937, that's close to 65, 70% of all arrests and incarcerations for cannabis have been people who are brown and Black. So you're nailing it. You nailed it right there. So go ahead.
Yeah, and you talk about that. Well, Monko was named. It means level of monkey. And if you think about in the 40s and 50s into the 60s in the Appalachians and Black communities, they call cannabis monkey.
Mm-hmm.
And so I named my the dispensary after that, which was Monko, was derived from that, because I wanted to pay heritage to those people who suffered for that. And as we've gone from one drug bill to the other one, it was always to keep their knee on our throat. And that enslavement process that you speak of, that's what happened. But we don't talk about the reality.
Let me tell you, brother, in about 20 years, it's going to take another 20 years, because all those that are in, office right now got to die off and kick it and get the, what out. But in about 20 years, when they finally start to tell the truth about this thing called the war on drugs, we will start to realize it wasn't a war on drugs. It was just a war on people of color. period. That's
Exactly.
what it was all set up to be. I mean, we even go back to the early, mm, no, probably about 71, 2, 3, 4 under Nixon, and right after Nixon, we start to recognize the fact that even the entire scourge of cocaine was something that was actually thought through and moved forward because the CIA and our government funded cocaine. They actually wanted cocaine, but they wanted to make sure that they turned cocaine into this thing called crack, and they
Yeah.
literally dropped it into the black communities deliberately to make sure they had something that they could say was so much worse than cocaine. So let's go after those people, not those people. And I mean, that's one half, but at the same time, they were already literally trying their best to do as much as they could do to attack cannabis coming in from Central and South America when they let cannabis be grown right in Arkansas and the South. I can remember early days in the 70s where people used to talk about Mexican weed. It was no Mexican weed. That weed was coming right from Little Rock, Arkansas. And
Take
it was an area down there that was called the Cornbread Mafia.
them.
That
Mhm.
literally they sold more. We look at cannabis right now in the United States and think that Humboldt County in Northern California is this, was the mecca of cannabis. It was not. The mecca of cannabis in the 60s and 70s was right in the South, Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee. And, they did a lot. That one of the biggest cannabis busts, marijuana busts in America took place in that area of the country, not in Northern California. So, I mean, yeah, there's so much to the
Yeah.
story that needs to be
And,
told correctly.
and Montel, you make up some points, but the point is that when we had the war on drugs, and you go back into when then President Biden, then Senator Biden introduced the war on drugs and that crime bill. A lot of times people don't understand the heritage or the background behind that. It
Right.
started off as as women's domestic violence. You had Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill issue, and the government wanted to get in and talk about this whole domestic violence thing on a national level. And then he was persuaded, if you're going to have that bill, well, we're going to do this thing called 101 with crack. And then, so now moving forward, fast forward to today, we look at these polls and they say, well, which demographic is he losing? Well, he's losing that the African American man, because most of the guys have come home on the Obama, where he went back and changed the law to a 1-to-1. So a lot of these guys who were incarcerated for 25, 30 years were coming home. They're not going to vote for Joe Biden.
Right. Right.
They
Yeah.
blame him for why they're in prison.
Correct. And now all of a sudden, you can't soft pedal it out of one side of your mouth. You can't go through this whole. We're going to talk about it here through this podcast. Let's talk about what you think about rescheduling versus descheduling, and I probably know where you
Right.
stand. Let's get to that in a minute or two. But let me talk me about you were a real estate magnate, man. You were like blowing it up, right? In real estate, and
Well, when I started in the real estate, it led me from the DMV to the Carolinas to Texas to Arizona, Utah. So I had my hands, and I end up in Baltimore in 2004 through 2005 through 2008. And then we started buying houses 15, 20 at a time, rehabbing them, putting them back on the market. And when the bubble bust, of course, they had to blame somebody. And we had a couple bad deals, and I'll take full responsibility for what I've done or didn't do. Lack of supervising, and I can also say it, just being greedy, understanding that I could flip. It was like taking candy from a baby.
sure,
Um, and so when the feds came and knocked on my door, it put me in a position where I, they took money from me, houses. I lost it, and I had to rebuild my life. But prison taught me one thing about perseverance, determination, but it taught me myself again. And when I got back on the real estate, I came back to DC in 2015 after a short stay in North Carolina, Texas, and just uh, got back and rekindled and relationships and got back in the real estate world with wholesaling and developing and consulting. And then when COVID happened, cannabis had always been on my mind, but it gave me the opportunity to sit down and write a business plan. And the one thing I wanted to do was take the stitch and stigma off of cannabis, especially because cannabis is never presented as luxury. It was always presented as something with a frown. And I said, well, if cocaine can be luxury, why can't cannabis? Cannabis is something that has never killed anybody.
Right.
So I came up with Monko, and people thought I was crazy. They were saying, hey, you're not going to get a license. You're not going to do this. You're spending all this money. I said, I trust God and I trust me. But the first thing I wanted to do was get a seat at the table. I became chairman of the I-71 committee here in DC, which fight for Black and brown people, small business people, returned citizens to have a voice or a pathway to a license. I was able to find a champion on the city council to help me and my voice and our voices to get some things changed. And that's been my biggest prize in this, to see others win, and to also be able to elevate the brand, also be able to take that stitch and stigma and to educate. But most of all is to get to see if we can continue to push the generational wealth for Black and brown people. For so long, this has been something that people walk on our backs about. They basically have taken advantage of us, like you said. This goes back Civil War. Nothing's changed, but in order to make change, you have to be about the change. So I've dedicated myself. I removed myself from real estate, and I said, if I'm going to put this much money and this much time and effort in something, it has to be 100% of me. So before my mom died, I got her blessings because I come from rural North Carolina church. So I just wanted to, get her nod on this. And when my mother told me to go for it, it was not, I knew she would, but it was a relief because she started talking to me about some things that you and I talk about. My father was a drug dealer. My mother was a school teacher. And I've been around this all my life, and I've seen people suffer one way or the other. And I know what a lot of my friends have gone through because they didn't have anything, and they had to turn to the streets. And so this opportunity has afforded me not only to have a pathway to a license, but vertically integrated, which is not many Black men in America get the opportunity to.
Correct. Absolutely. And so, DC though is probably one of the toughest markets in the country to be involved in cannabis with, because you guys have some really strange laws down there. I'm still trying to figure them out today. You really can't sell it, but you can
Gift it.
gift it along with what you sell, which is
Right.
just weird to me. So
It's weird.
you have a dispensary that I can walk into and buy a pipe, and I can pay X amount of dollars for a pipe. And with that pipe, I get a certain amount of cannabis that you give to me for free.
Absolutely. And so here we are now where we're actually going in a license. I'm actually about to get placard, where we're actually starting to shut down gifting stores, and we'll probably have roughly 70 some licensees by the end of July. And the city will no longer be gifting. The problem with why we have these crazy laws, there's a congressman from Andy Harrison from Easton, Maryland, that put a rider on DC back in 2014 so that DC couldn't become recreational. The only way DC becomes recreational is that the president has the ability to put a recreation in his budget bill, which for another year he hasn't.
Yeah, I mean, because again, most people don't understand. DC is not a state; it's the District of Columbia, which is
It's a
controlled
territory.
by a territory controlled by Congress. So they get to do whatever they want with you. But now,
Uh,
when you said that they're going to get rid of the gifting kinds of dispensaries and now giving out licenses for dispensaries.
Yeah, so gifting dispensaries will become medical dispensaries. They're the illicit market or the black market or the gifting market will disappear.
Well,
Um,
it'll continue to exist. It'll just go under the radar.
it will be under the radar, but there will be no more brick and mortar. You won't be able to walk into these stores, gifting stores anymore. They're actually going to actually start doing raids and doing some other things to combat those efforts.
Wow.
In 2022, when we sat down with Council my I-71 team, we came up with agreement to in a year to move forward and come under one umbrella. DC problem is that the biggest problem is that we're a federal government territory.
Right.
Most people here are even state, local government, or contracting. So it makes it hard for the medical market in a sense because people will not go out and get a medical card.
So you'll have to go buy a medical card, get a medical card. They're going to charge you some fee for it. Then you can go to a dispensary and actually seriously purchase cannabis.
Yes, and in that there is some self-attestation where you can actually don't have to buy a card, but you can pay a fee and come into the actual dispensary. Our laws are quirky because we've been trying to work with Congress, Andy Harris, Jim Comer, among some others, to try to help us out to remove this rider. We thought that we would have a chance because of what you mentioned earlier, rescheduling, but we're all waiting for the rescheduling thing to happen.
And you brought it up right here. Let's talk about this. But I have been and think that we all have to be careful what we look for or wish for when it comes to this whole word rescheduling, because if they reschedule from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, that then puts this under the purview of the FDA. And the FDA then gets to say, excuse me a second, we as a country, the United States of America, have owned a patent on all the minor cannabinoids since about 2002. And, I don't know, a lot of people, you knew that, right? That the
Yeah,
federal government filed a patent for itself, 6630507, that gives it basically they have the patent on CBD. So what the federal government could do is step in and say, if you got any CBD type products in your store, stop selling them because we own it. And so this whole rescheduling thing is going to open up a can of, what that's going to take us a while.
well, and you're right, and to say that, but here's the flip side: if they're not going to deschedule it, because if you deschedule, that means you decriminalize it.
And make it
And
a
if you
nutraceutical.
decriminalize, that means there's 35,000. I think that's the number. You could correct me. 35,000 inmates across this country. As
Well, I think
soon as
it's way
you
more than
open,
that, my brother.
yeah, and I said like,
Yeah.
but I know I heard a 35,000 number, and if you start letting people out of prison in mass groves, and when we start talking about this, the systematic racism around cannabis, especially among and just crime in general, and
Look,
and
look
and
look
and
across the nation. We have all these for-profit prisons. For-profit
yes,
prisons won't get filled if you can't pick up a little black boy on the street and make him empty his pocket for a joint and put him in jail for 5 years. See what I'm
it,
saying?
yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and that's my point. And now, but not only the prisons, the parole officers, the probation officers, the judges, everybody takes a hit.
Yep.
And once you start messing with commerce, especially when white communities, that they don't take kind to that because again, it's that enslavement that you spoke about earlier that comes to mind, that they're saying, well, this is another way to enslave them.
Right.
And when we talk about rescheduling, yeah, now that's a big hurdle. Now, if the federal government says we got a patent on CBD, cannabinoids, whatever the case may be, it's going to cause a bigger issue because the black market will go crazy again.
Well, and I will tell you, in DC, I'm sure that when they close down all those gifting places, the black market's going to flourish like no tomorrow. It's got to, because I mean, a lot of people don't want to put their names on any list, and anybody can go track them down for later. So
Well,
you're going to
and
see.
that's the biggest thing. This is why I've been pushing recreational. I think that there's enough studies and case studies show what cannabis can and can't do at this point.
Right.
And if you can go to every corner in any metropolitan city, including DC, there's a liquor store on every corner.
Right.
If you can go and buy liquor, why can't you go buy a joint without somebody asking you, with just checking your ID and not putting you in a system or a database?
Sure. I mean,
And
honestly, that's really the question that needs to be asked. Because I mean, because it's honestly, what right do you have to determine what my euphoria is?
right.
You know,
Well,
you go to congressional events and you see them all stand around with, some sort of liquor in their hand. That's
absolutely.
okay, but you can't. Just doesn't make sense.
But again, that goes back to that mentality, that slave mentality.
Yeah.
As long as they can continue to put a post on you and direct you and tell you what you have to do, that's what happens. And they're laughing about it because the one thing that this country is going to have to do, if cannabis evolves at this level, there's got to be some banking involved. This Safer
Right.
Banking Act has to pass. How does it pass? Does it pass with rescheduling? Does it pass with, because right now banks are suffering for depositories.
Right. Right. Right.
And what bigger business to give you more of a depository than cannabis?
Especially when you know that back in 2021, we sold over $25 billion worth of cannabis in the legal market in the United States. 25 billion is we sold more cannabis than we sold milk. We sold more cannabis than we sold energy drinks legally. And there was over 3 times that sold in the black and gray market across the country. So that's another $75 billion worth of revenue.
So you're talking about $100 billion industry.
Correct. And back in 2021, which is insane. So let's talk a little bit about now, what will Monkos do? Right now, let's talk about, describe and explain the luxury lifestyle aspects of Monkos.
Well, Monko is luxury because it's the experience, the education. I honestly built I say a Gucci or Louis Vuitton store of cannabis. So when you walked in the door, it took that stigma and stench. It reminded you of being in a high level or a high elevated department store. And what I wanted to bring is that experience. But I've taught my bud tenders and my staff is about how do we greet, how we educate, and how do we navigate products so that the consumer or the connoisseur that walks through the door, we get one opportunity to give them the experience of their life. And when they walk out, they speak of that because they know, number one, we got a great product, we got a great staff, you had a great experience, and it was elevated. It wasn't, if you go in some of these places, it's too sterile or it's too dirty. And what we wanted to do was say, hey, we're going to elevate that experience. We're going to we're going to ignite your curiosity.
You're the essence of cannabis.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And in that process, that's why, our growth is, and then I started Pleasant Hill Wellness to pay homage just to the neighborhood. I grew up back in North Carolina with Black farmers who, when I grew up, my grandfather was a hog farmer, but my uncles grew what they call rabbit tobacco, which was cannabis, behind the hog pen. Mm-hmm. And they sold nickel bags in brown envelopes that were basically 3.5s. So at the end of the day is I wanted to pay higher to that. So I'm starting Pleasant Hill Wellness so that we can continue to do so and white label to the District of Columbia great product. Because number one, it starts with the product. If you don't have a good product, you can have good people and not a good product.
Correct.
You can have good product and not good people. I
Yeah.
believe that you have to have everything in both. I think people are very important. I tell my staff we're a team, we're a family, we're a community. I just did a Women in Cannabis event last night to celebrate some of the pioneers in this area, women doing Women Empowerment Month. And I tell them every time, you guys are just an extension of me. You're my family. So it's
I've had a
very
couple of them. I've had a couple of the women in cannabis in DC on my podcast, so I understand what you're saying. And now you one of the things that you definitely try to make sure that you do through your own system is that idea of social justice and social equity. Correct?
absolutely. And I tell people all the time, look, I'm a man. I'm incarcerated. I walk around with an F on my chest. I'm a felon. If I
Yep.
don't fight for people of color or people who have returned, I'll be a liar. I'll be a fake
Right.
because someone gave me a second chance.
Right.
And every day I fight for our people or people of color because I know some of them, they have street sense, but not book sense, or they can do certain things. If no one's able to go and talk to the policymakers and the legislators and the people so that we can get the opportunity, the door will continue to be closed. And
Yep.
guess what? Guess who's going to win? Who's been winning ever since we've been born? The white man.
Right. Right.
And I don't get into this black and white thing because I really don't care. I get into a people thing. We're going to do what's fair.
Right. Now, your brand is, you said it, you're virtually or vertically integrated, and one of very few Black businesses in the country that are fully vertically integrated. Do you grow in the district, or do you have to
Well,
grow?
I'm in the process of opening my grow so that I
And
will grow in the district.
indoor grow, indoor,
Indoor,
outdoor combination,
indoor,
indoor grow, and
indoor
right
grow.
now, and so where do you get your feedstock now? You buy it in the
Uh,
market.
in the black market.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So you get your feedstock in. You have your own processing facility.
I will have my own process and
You
manufacturing
will.
process. Will, yes.
Okay. All right. So right now you're buying product out of the marketplace and for
Yep,
putting on your shelves. Okay.
absolutely.
And when do you intend to have that open?
Well, we're in the process finishing negotiating this lease permit. We're probably looking at late 25, early 26 when all said and done.
Really? It's going to take about a year.
Yeah, it's going to take a year. We're building out 30 some thousand square feet by time permit everything. It is definitely a process.
Well, as you move forward towards opening up that facility, let's stay in contact because I have a brand that I think probably would fit very well with what you're trying to do. Because it's a luxury brand in the sense I'm the formulator myself, so I've been doing some really interesting things with using THC and minor cannabinoids mixed together so that people can walk out and basically get the experience that they want to get rather than be driven by an experience that somebody created for them. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, I definitely want to stay in contact and let's continue to work together. I've always admired you and your show and your passionate not only for your people but for any cause that you got behind. And so many times in life people get caught up on themselves versus people.
Oh yeah,
Um,
no, man. It's
and
it's all about being caught up in the mission, not the
yes,
individual.
right,
Look, I'm a firm believer, my friend, in the rising tide lifts all boats. So, if I
yep.
can do something with you, you can do something with me, and two of us together can expand our reach and make people look at us and say, dude, we got two brothers together doing something together for all of us. Let's do it, man. Come on.
Well, and I'm definitely about that. And I also say a slogan that or a verse that I use is called "There's no robbery in fair exchange."
Yep. There you
And
go.
and at the end of the day is if you and I work together, we can never rob each other. We don't take from.
Absolutely.
And and you know, one hand will wash the other, and that's you know, it's a old adage in the Bible. It's something that I was taught as a kid, as a young man, and my grandmother said, "Never, don't let the right hand know what the left one gonna do." And you know, that's how I grew up. And when you grow up in the South, where people seen slavery and people seeing their own people slave, it's a different conversation. So I've been blessed.
Look, so often in this business, unfortunately, this business actually helps to create bucket crabs. You know what I'm saying? So,
Oh, tell me about it.
and my brother, you know,
Tell me about it.
you all end up getting boiled. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
Exactly.
instead of fighting each other, you know, we could always kind of protect each other a little bit rather than fighting and yanking each other back and forth. So, you know, at any point in
Yeah.
time you want to work together, man, I would look forward to an opportunity because you're setting a new standard, really, when it comes to cannabis retail. How do you stay ahead of the curve?
Well, we continue to, number one, technology, working with the Hearst of the world, working with you know, SEO companies, and just seeing how can we continue to market to um, a segment of America that hasn't even been marketed to.
Correct.
And then also by staying relevant, continue to fight your cause, my cause, social equity, continue to stand up for what's right for people of color. And then most of all is just staying committed.
Mhm.
It's a commitment here. And when you make a commitment, I told my mother, and I promised her this, that anything I got in after I got out of trouble, I was going to be committed. Um, and I know the works that it takes to get done. We got a lot of work here to do in DC, in you know, making it rec and changing. It's an emerging market. You know that we saw 22 million people last year in DC?
Wow.
Well, just think about it. Maryland had a $700 million cannabis. That's what they did in cannabis last year.
Yep.
$700 million in revenue.
That's crazy.
Right. Now you take half of that 22 million. Maryland has 4 million people. DC has 900,000. But we had 22 million people visit DC. If you take half that number and you can market to that number, or you can sell cannabis to 11 million people, because that's what the ratio is basically, about a 50-50 split.
I bet you probably end up being more like 60, 70%, but you're right. So let's say,
Right.
yeah,
On the conservative side, right?
Yep. Yep.
Just for, you're talking about $1 billion a year.
Yep.
So
And there's enough there to go around to everybody.
everybody.
Yes.
And so the opportunities here are so big. We just have to fight. You know, I need your help. Need you to know who you know on the Hill. How can we sit down with cabinet members of the president's cabinet and talk about this? He wants to know why people are not voting for him in a certain black men or in a class. I can tell him why.
Right.
Let's have a real conversation. If he wants to finish the job, finish the job.
Yep. I'm telling you, he needs you right now, my brother. I'm telling you, he needs you more than anybody else he's got us there, because we know for a fact right now, if he were to, whichever one of them comes forward first and says, I'm going to either completely reschedule on the first day that I get in office, or completely deschedule, or make an opportunity so that cannabis is made available at an adult use level across the country, the person who does that first is the person who's the president of the United States for the next 4 years.
Exactly. And let me say something. Let me say something else too. I got a brother who's incarcerated. He's 62. Out of 62 years, he's been incarcerated 37 of them.
Wow.
He's in New Jersey. And when we talk, if I mention Joe Biden, it's almost like he want to slap me.
Wow.
So think about this. How many other brothers feel the same exact way who stayed in those prison libraries, those law libraries, to try to research and get their time cut and all this type thing. How many of them feel the same way, that they're not even going to vote for Biden, or there's a vote for Trump? Because if you vote for Trump, or you don't go and vote and exercise, you still got to vote for Trump.
Right.
We don't understand. There's a lot of different moving parts here. And I've been trying to get the opportunity to sit down with someone on the federal level that can have this conversation, because it's a candid conversation that needs to happen. When Obama released,
what's so silly is that got too many gatekeepers around him that are stopping you from having that conversation, and they don't even recognize that they are doing so in a detrimental way to his opportunity to get elected.
Well, and you said, you hit it right on the gatekeepers. But if you take, when Obama said, hey, we're going to make this thing 1-to-1, and we start letting these people, who you think they were going to go vote for?
Of course.
You had to understand that these guys still carry some type of anger or some type of blame or fault with you. We did something good, but there's no reciprocity. We always talk about social equity or DEI. We talk about, but when there's no justice or reciprocity or any type of commerce involved back to somebody who had to do time to lose their life. But we got all these appropriating committees giving money to Ukraine, Israel, all of that. But we never talk about the people you harm right here in your own country.
Right.
And when you do that, that's what the issue is. Because as a man of color, I didn't go to jail for cannabis or drugs, but I went to prison, and I know what prison does. I know how it strips your soul. If you ain't got God inside your heart, you come out a better man or a better criminal.
Right.
And a lot of people don't understand that. And I tell people all the time, if I didn't have a strong network, a strong family around me, I probably would have came out a better criminal.
Right.
But God said, no, I want you to be a better person, and this is what I want you to do. This is not about me, Montel. Believe me, the last thing I ever thought was I was going to get in cannabis.
Got it.
Because this is uncharted territories, undeveloped. Real estate, the trees are matured, the roads are paved, everything. Cannabis, we're still putting the infrastructure there because we don't know. And you were correct when you said one thing. The first person that says, I'm going to reschedule or deschedule will win. That's not a doubt, because every Gen Z in America, that's, if you're talking about a race to the ballot box.
Yep.
We grew up looking for a drink. They grew up looking for a joint.
Oh, we know that for a fact, because alcohol sales in America are on their way down. Alcohol sales worldwide are on their way down, for sure. Since we're on it, let's think about this for a second. What do you see the future of cannabis being? Where do you think it's going to go? What do you think?
Well, first of all, is you touched on a couple of things. It's going to probably we got about another 20 years to push this good old boy mentality out of there. We need more progressive people and not on a local level and a federal level to make these decisions. But I see cannabis in the future just like alcohol was in the future. If I could have been a fly on the wall after they got rid of Capone, and they knew that making alcohol, or because my granddaddy and great grandfather were bootleggers. So that was another way to stop money. So now you stop bringing commerce in from cannabis. Once you reschedule, whoever does that, whoever introduces banking, once you start seeing these things at this level, you're going to see, we're talking, we don't even know the amount of revenue that cannabis will be able to generate. But most importantly,
we're just scratching the surface. Go ahead.
The life that it's going to save. I think the research has just started, not only with cannabis, but psilocybin, mushrooms. I think that we're scratching the surface.
Well, when it comes to cannabis alone, man, we're just like those Wright brothers pushing that wooden plane down the hill. We haven't even
Exactly.
really begun to know what's cannabis. First off, I was having a conversation with somebody a little earlier today and talking about the fact that in this industry, and I'm glad that you said it a couple times, that the fact that you reached out to others in the DC area. First off, we've got to start coming together as a industry. We got to stop this bucket crab thing, trying to pull somebody down because they got a little bit more, traffic flow than you have. We need to start working together more closely so that collectively we can take advantage of the entire hemp business at all. What I mean by that is the fact that, yes, cannabis is a great consumer product, but there are so many other things that come out of hemp and cannabis, all the byproduct that's left behind from all the used, when we process.
Right.
There's not one organization in any state across the country that's just going around and picking up the refuse from cannabis processing. And we now know the hemp plant itself has probably 2,500 different usages. Everything from the seeds when it's being done, doesn't have any cannabinoids in it. Those seeds are the highest protein-laden seeds on the planet. Back before 1937, everybody in the world ate some form of cannabis or hemp, hemp-based porridge.
Right.
That was something you ate. We know now that you can use the stems, sticks, leaves, and burn those down into a process that creates a graphene that has a better electrical storage capability than graphite.
Well, the other thing too is you think about it. Hemp got replaced with plastic.
Yes.
We were using hemp for industrial stuff, and then
Correct.
came along plastic.
America was built on hemp, my brother. I mean, every
Yes.
sail, every rope, all the clothing, the entire Revolutionary Army was clothed in hemp. The only thing that the North and South had in common was the fact that they had hemp uniforms, hemp fiber
Yep.
uniforms. We used hemp for just about everything in our hemp seed oil was burned in almost every single house in the country because it
Yeah.
was so easy to get. And so, what's so ridiculous is the fact that we as an industry haven't come together and tried to help exploit all the other verticals that we have in this industry.
Well, that's one of the problems. We go to war. We went to Iraq and Iran. When we bomb these places, all the toxic they plant hemp plants to remove the
Correct.
toxin from the earth.
Well, look at Chernobyl. They've been planting hemp over there because we know that the hemp plant sucks up some of basically cleans the soil for us.
Yes.
And if we were actually doing some smart farming in this country, we would be planting hemp in between all the rows of all the other food that we plant because it cleans and leaches the toxins out of the soil. So you'd have a better corn plant. You'd have a better, wheat. You'd have better
Well,
barley. You'd
it
have
would
better.
also lead to us having cleaner food,
Correct.
which wouldn't cause cancer and some of the other things that we're dealing with. So that's a
Absolutely.
whole different conversation. But going forward, what we have to understand is this: cannabis is here to stay. It's not going
Absolutely.
nowhere. It's over.
Cat's out the bag.
And every young person in America who at some point when they get introduced, they're gonna like cannabis for something.
Yep.
Older people or mature people are using this drug to relax, to meditate, for pain.
Dude, and overseas in places like Israel, it's a geriatric drug because it helps
Exactly.
reduce the amount of pharmaceuticals that people are on. So you're preaching, my brother. Keep it up.
So
Look,
America has to understand Europe has already embraced this. Parts of the other parts of this world have already embraced it.
over 150 countries have pulled out of the 1963 treaty that banned the exportation or importation of hemp. So the rest of the world is getting ready to jump way ahead of us, man. South Africa, Chile, Peru, Argentina, Isle of Man, Germany just legalized.
Yeah.
You know, China is growing hemp right now for hemp exploitation. So, you know, it's like when we finally recognize the fact that as an industry, we need to come together to help us move this whole thing forward, I think that's going to help in immense ways. What do you think about? I mean, are you got your sights on DC right now? Do you plan on expanding out to any other municipalities?
So I'm looking at what rescheduling or descheduling. I got some other emerging markets. I don't, you know, I go where opportunity is, but I'm also smart with my investors.
Right.
And we look at each state as opportunity. I think
Mhm.
what's going to be compelling to see after rescheduling, what happens in North Carolina and Georgia.
Right. Well, Georgia is a strange state. I happen to be in Georgia right now, working with a company down there, which is Botanical Sciences, to get my products on shelves down there. But Georgia, and then they you want to talk about a really strange law. Their law is as strange as DC's in a sense.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
I
you
think
can't tell. No,
rescheduling changes that though.
yes, it could. Hopefully, it does. That's exactly what we want
I
to
think rescheduling. That's why I said I'm sitting on the sideline, kind of saying I've been talking to some folks, making some relationships down there. Um, you know, South Carolina will probably be last in the union,
Yep.
and the thing about it is I because you know, I would be remiss to say anything, but they just don't get it.
Right.
And when you're last to get on the buggy, you know, especially in a poor state like South Carolina,
Yep.
there's a lot of opportunity that's missed. And from an economic standpoint, you know, we always talk about helping communities of color, but when you go south, you helping community that are deprived and poor,
Yes. No matter what the color.
no matter what color they are. And
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot of opportunities been missed in these southern states, not only from a job standpoint, from a trade standpoint, but also from a healing standpoint, but most of all from an economic standpoint. That's what's needed. But we don't, the lawmakers and the people of those states, they've washed them, they're brainwashed their minds so much.
Right.
And they when Republicans, and I'm sorry to say this, they talk about, well, you don't need government. Well, these, if you don't have any type of social programs, these people starve.
Correct. Yep. Well, my
And
friend, let me ask you this question. How can people find out more about you, about Monko? Where would they go?
so you can go know more about me. You can email me at Terrence White at Monko.co. You can visit us at Monko.co, or you Google search. We're located in the Mount Vernon Triangle area of the District of Columbia at 444 K Street. Or anything that you need from me, Montel, reach out. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you.
All of my listeners to understand how to get a hold of you. And my friend, you always have a home here. We just barely scratched the surface trying to chop it up today. I need to have you back. So, you know, I'm going to have my office reach back out to you. Let's do it again because there's
Let's
so
do
much
it
more I
again.
know you have to say. Okay. And
Thank
there's no
you.
much
I
more to do.
appreciate you. Continue the work that you do, and let me know if you need anything.
Absolutely, my brother. And I will reach out to you as you move forward. If you're thinking about going anywhere else, or you're as you expand and you need some other products to put on your shelves in that exclusive luxury area, let me know because I'm right there for you. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You stay well. You stay safe. Keep that family of yours safe, and all of you out there, stay frosty. Keep learning, keep studying, keep understanding that there's so much more information that you don't know. It's what you don't know that's going to help make you a better cannabis consumer and help you help others understand the product even better. Okay, so folks, I want to thank you all for being a part of today's show. Terrence White, you are a pleasure, my friend, and a joy, my friend. So, folks, make sure you reach out to his website and get as much information you can about Monko and what his intentions are. I want to thank you all for being here. You stay honest, stay blunt, and I'll see you on the next Let's Be Blunt. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.